Bambi, The Reckoning, directed by Dan Aaran. And this, of course, is part of the Poohverse kind of horror universe that was created by Scott Jeffrey, aka Scott Chambers, and Reese Wakefield. And obviously based on a IP which is now in the public domain. I do think that kind of the initial wave of interest in these kind of public domain horror movies has somewhat waned, and I think the kind of the momentum that was brought in the initial Winnie the Pooh movie has certainly not been kind of purely, not being exploited like it could have been. I think has kind of fallen off the radar a little bit. But if you're familiar with Jagged Edge Productions, Scott Chambers, aka Scott Jeffries, he creates a lot of low budget, quickly produced movies. These kind of Poohverse movies, if you like, have had a little bit more production value and time taken with them. What is the story of this one? There's not a huge amount of story, if I'm honest. It focuses on this kind of family having a get-together in this kind of country estate. On the way there, a mother and her son are attacked by, a mutant stag. And then it kind of harasses this family through the rest of the movies. And then we also have our human bad guys, this corporation that's been dumping chemicals in the forest, thus creating not just the killer Bambi, but other kind of forest creatures that are mutants as well. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. Let's talk the positives. I will say I think the direction is stronger here than a lot of movies that come out of Jagged Edge Productions. Dan Aaran, I think, has certainly a more confident style of direction here, and I think certainly on a technical basis, the direction is pretty strong. I like some of the kind of the shots, the framing, the way these particular kind of sequences are constructed. I actually think it looks fairly well put together on a directorial standpoint. So I actually kind of quite like some of the kind of the technical elements in this movie. The cinematography, obviously this is kind of taking place over one night, so it's pretty much all sort of night shoots, but I think it's, that you can always kind of see what's going on well enough, and you get a good idea of the, what's supposed to be happening, and variety of different kind of shots and things like that. So I actually think on a technical basis the movie is actually quite proficient. Now, Jagged Edge Productions, they produce a lot of movies, so they are, if anything, proficient at pumping out these movies. But this one, I think the direction stands out a little bit as better than a lot of these movies that come out from them, I would say. The second thing is I think the VFX here are pretty strong. Again, this is a lower budget movie. We've got to bear that in mind. This is not a mainstream film by any means. But I've got to say, because of the nature of Bambi being a creature rather than a kind of humanoid figure, which we can easily just kind of like, put prosthetics on a human actor, this is a CGI creation. And I've got to say, it's fairly good. Again, we're not talking mainstream blockbuster level kind of CGI here, but certainly if you are familiar with indie horror movies that kind of use CGI, this is on the better side. And I think the kind of the Bambi stag makes for a quite an imposing and well put together VFX sequences, and I gotta say he's in it a reasonable amount. It's not like they have only kept him. It's not like the Asylum or Sci-Fi Channel films where you only ever see like the briefest glimpses of these kind of CGI creations just for the trailer. You get a reasonable amount here, and I gotta say it's kind of well put together. And that's not the only forest creature. If you're familiar with the Bambi story, certainly the Disney one, he has a particular kind of chum that shows up, or at least a version of that, in a kind of quite a kind of a fun sequence. Yeah, the VFX are pretty good for this kind of level of lower budget film. It's actually relatively gory at times as well, and the gore is a mix between sort of CGI and practical VFX. again, I thought it was fairly well put together on that kind of side of things as well. So I actually thought the gore, although it's certainly not a gore film exactly, this is a creature feature, but when we do see those gore shots, they are done to a kind of a reasonable standard. So again, these are all more technical elements, but I think it makes for, visually speaking, an interesting and fun concept. And obviously we've seen plenty of creature features, like kind of a muted deer or stag. It's an interesting kind of concept that you don't see too many of. There's lots of kind of like grizzlies or sharks and things like this. So it's nice to have a kind of a different type of kind of creature, animal on the loose sort of style thing. It doesn't have a huge amount to do with the Bambi story, I will say. In a way, I think this may have been positioned better to be like a Christmas movie, and had they made it like a kind of like one of the Santa's reindeers or something, that might have been a fun way to go with it and have a little bit more theming in it perhaps, because I didn't really feel like it had, outside of it being a deer, much to do with Bambi, to be honest with you. The tone is actually quite serious. And so if you don't like goofy, I say this is a goofy film still, but if you don't like the horror comedy style of movies, this is a sort of a serious take on a killer Bambi, believe it or not. I have to say, this leads me on to what doesn't work. Maybe that wasn't the best move. I mean, these kind of Poohverse movies have tended to take the subject matter a little, maybe more seriously than one would expect, and again, this one may have could have lent into a bit more of a goofier or sort of. I mean, the concept is sort of silly, but it takes itself very seriously. Well, it seems like an odd choice to me, but that's the choice that they made, so that there it is. Okay, so the main issues with this movie is, number one, there's really not a lot of story here. It's just this kind of deer attacking the family, and that's basically it. And we get some kind of human bad guys that are obviously going to get their comeuppance and stuff, who have been responsible for everything. But there's a real lack of actual kind of plot in this movie. I mean, maybe you're not watching this for the plot, but unfortunately it's just like an extended sequences of people running around in the woods being chased by a killer Bambi. That's it. That's the story. There's a little bit of, it tries to have a little bit of, our main kind of woman, she's estranged from her husband, and all of the rest of it. But that in actual regards to what's happening in this story, not much. So it just feels like the script of this one was written on the back of a cigarette packet, really, and that'll do. So yeah, it's not exactly an engaging narrative, I have to say. It's very, very basic. Added to that, I think, which makes it kind of doubles down on this problem, is that the characters are so thin, which is the second issue I have with this movie. Outside of this, our main female protagonist has had some marital issues. That's it. That's your extent of your characterization, really. I mean, it's just like the barest minimum of characters here, and therefore you are just not invested. You are not invested in any of these kind of characters because they are so paper thin. So I think this movie succeeds on a technical element, but story-wise, there's nothing there. Character-wise, it's extremely weak, which are my two main issues. Outside of that, the acting is mixed, let me just say. I mean, again, we're talking about a killer Bambi movie. We might not be expecting Denzel Washington or Leonardo DiCaprio here, but while some I think are okay, our female protagonist, fine. But there are some other kind of performances that are on the weaker side, and some that are out on the hammy side, and somewhere it's just like, what are they doing? I mean, I'll give you one example, and I'm not saying this is the only example, but this is just, I wanted to qualify what I'm saying. So There's a sequence here where a character is lost in the woods and they're attacked by killer bunnies. Yeah. And he backs away and trips over and his head falls into like a bear trap. Now he doesn't instantly kill him, but he's screaming and stuff. And we see him kick him, but we see like a wide angle shot and his arms are just, you know, he's just not moving his arms. So the direction here has been like kick, you know, but like surely you would at least move your arms. Try to kind of like, you know, get your head out or at least flail around. But no, his arms are completely static. His arms aren't trapped. They're just kind of there. And again, it's this sort of like, you know, that is like poor acting. It's an example of it. So, but some of the kind of just the line delivery on some of these characters that are already very kind of broad and stereotypes and things like this, some of the line deliveries and are on the weaker side, let me just say. I don't think you were probably expecting anything less than that. But, yeah, there you go. So, interestingly, you know, visually speaking, I think this movie is relatively strong, I have to say. But on any type of story or characters, it's really on the quite weak side, I have to say. Possibly weaker than the other kind of like Poohverse movies that I have seen, if I'm honest. This is probably the weakest in regards to that. Just in regards to story and character elements here. Although I say, technically, on a VFX wise, it's probably the best. So, you know, as a film though, as a whole, this would have been a great short. This would have made a great short. But as a feature-length movie, it's weak. But I will give it a 5 out of 10 because, as I say, on a technical level, it's very proficient, at least for the movie budget that it is. Worth watching if you want a bit of a fun visual treat, but don't be expected to be invested in this story at all. 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What were your thoughts? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.